Hi, welcome to Lachlan Likes a Thing, a show where I take a thing and see whether or not I like it. Now the thing we're looking at in this video is the former Sony flagship headphone, the MDR-SA5000. Now this video is going to be a little different from some of the other videos. I'm going to try some new things. It's going to be a little bit more casual, just because this headphone I thought was a good opportunity to try new things with. This is actually a discontinued model. You can't buy it anymore unless you buy it used like I did. So the SA5000 was around for almost a decade and it was discontinued in 2012. It's basically like the mass production version of the very rare and very expensive flagship Sony headphone, the Qualia 010. Now the SA5000 had a retail price of $699 when it was released, but you can find it used now for about $300. I wouldn't actually pay even $300 for the sound of this headphone, unless you're like me, you're like a bit of a Sony collector, and I think the SA5000 represents a time in the company's history where they made really premium, amazing feeling headphones, and hopefully that time comes back. Now the reason why I say this is because the SA5000 is an amazingly beautiful, gorgeously built headphone. The entire frame is made out of magnesium alloy. And I've often read comparisons with the build of the Sennheiser HD800, and a lot of people have said on Headphone that the SA5000 is actually even better built than the HD800. Now I can't really say that. I've had the HD800 in my hand, and it's very substantial and chunky, whereas the SA5000 is, as you can see, it's a lot more delicate. It's almost kind of steampunky in its look, but it is really beautifully built, and it just feels amazing in the hand. And compared to the current crop of Sony kind of flagship headphones, I guess you could say, like the portable MDR-1R or the plastic MA900, the comparison in build quality really cannot be made. This is a fantastic, super premium feeling headphone. That said, it's not all fantastic. One of the really commonly pointed out points of failure is that the Y splitter on the cable, the 3-meter cable of the SA5000, tends to fail, and a lot of owners have gotten theirs recabled. Luckily that hasn't happened in my pair yet, but that's something to look out for if you are interested in getting a pair of these. In terms of comfort, the SA5000 has this big fabric harness that just sits on top of your head, so it's quite comfortable. You know, it's quite nice, quite lightweight. That said, it's not as comfortable as the baby brother SA3000, which was a bit more lightweight. It was made completely out of plastic, it had a single-sided cable, and the harness didn't have these two metal bands across the top, which make it slightly less comfortable. Now I actually used to own a pair of the SA3000, that's how I became interested in the SA5000. They basically do sound kind of the same, so if you're really interested in this headphone's sound, that's the one I would check out. However, the SA5000 is, as I said, absolutely gorgeous. Now another thing that you'll probably have noticed is that the leather pads, the real leather pads on my SA5000 are a little stiff, they're a little worn now. So, you know, I don't get the best of seals or the best of bass response from these pads. I can confirm for you that Shure SRH840 pads fit on this. Fostex T50RP pads kind of fit on this, they're a little oversized. And Denon DX1000 series pads do also fit on this, but kind of barely because of that big plastic plate that's inside the Denon pads. Now, in terms of sound, the SA5000 has a really unique sound, and honestly, I'm not sure if I paid $800 for this as a flagship headphone, I'd be entirely happy. The SA5000 is kind of often described as one of the most detailed sounding headphones in the world, and I kind of agree with this. With the SA5000, it's kind of like listening to laser beams in science fiction movies, and what I mean by that is that it has this kind of incredibly glossy, fast kind of transient speed and performance. It sounds very fast, it sounds incredibly detailed. But at the same time, I'm not sure whether the SA5000 is actually that articulate. I've heard Ortho Dynamics or other kind of headphones produce a kind of better presentation of detail, and maybe it's a little more delicate than the SA5000. With the SA5000 though, what's interesting is that even though it has a really high frequency kind of emphasis along that kind of range of where the triangles and the strings are, it never really sounds sibilant. It doesn't really sound harsh. So they managed to combine this kind of really strong high frequency detail with a slightly warmer kind of mid-bass tone. Now, one thing with the SA5000 is that the bass performance on the SA5000 is kind of woeful. Basically, the bass drops off a cliff after about 100 hertz, so any kind of sub bass is really lost on the SA5000. It's not particularly tight. And it does depend on which pads you use, but basically no matter what pads you use, you won't really be satisfied if you're after a lot of bass. In terms of soundstage, the SA5000 has a bit of an unusual soundstage. It sounds fairly wide, but at the same time, it has these kind of echoes that make it sound a bit unnatural, almost like you're listening through a kind of metal tube. So just these kind of echoes, especially in the high frequencies. It's definitely not as clean sounding as a lot of orthodynamics that I've heard. It doesn't sound as clean as something like a modern day AD1000X kind of headphone, but overall the SA5000 has a sound where if you are a bit of a detail freak, if you really want to get an impression of a great degree of detail, the SA5000 might be worth a listen to. Definitely, I think it's one of those headphones where you probably should try before you buy, or if you do buy it, just be prepared to not like it. That said, this is one of the headphones that I'm most proud to have as a kind of collector, just because it is so beautiful. And I think, hopefully one day Sony will get around to replacing this with an actual flagship headphone. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. It is a headphone that hasn't had that much written about it, but I do think it is one of the cooler headphones that Sony has made. If you did find it interesting, like the video, click the like button because it does help other people find the video. And thanks to everyone who does that and who subscribes to my channel. You can talk to me on Twitter at LockLikesAThing or at Facebook at facebook.com/LachlanLikesAThing, and happy listening.